Before the introduction, you should all know that this is technically a sequel to my last countdown, my top 10 favorite Sonic games. Spoiler alert, Sonic Adventure 2 wasn't actually on that list. I was waiting to talk about it in a video dedicated to just this one game in particular. So number 1 of the previous list is actually my second favorite Sonic game of all time. But yeah, watch that video first, then come back to this one. Sonic Adventure 2 marked the last Sonic game on Sega consoles on Sega's last console they put out, the Dreamcast. This game has gained quite a legacy over the many years fans have been playing it, and it's often given the high honor of being Sonic's best game to date, period. I don't want to waste too much time with the intro here, as the rest of the video does most of the talking anyway. However, what I do want to start with is a few of the cons Sonic Adventure 2 has. Look, I'm going to be sucking this game's metaphorical dick and balls for the rest of the video, so let me just list some of the problems that should definitely be called into light when discussing the game. Think of this as a counterbalance to all the great things I've said and will say about the game. So please enjoy this gangbang of negativity on your favorite childhood game with the chows and shit. Alright, let's go. Sonic Adventure had Knuckles hunting for the pieces of the Master Emerald in his levels, and the player used this convenient radar system to find them. When this gameplay carried over to SA2, the overall control was improved, but the radar system was fucked right the fuck up. Before, you had 5 different levels on the radar telling you how far or close each piece was, ranging from blue to green to yellow to pink to red. Meanwhile, in SA2, 3 different levels on the radar. That wouldn't be so bad on its own, but now the radar only tells you the location of 1 emerald piece at a time. This means that if you're right next to a shard, but it isn't the first piece the radar will recognize, you will get absolutely no reading for it. You can still find them if your eyes are quick enough to catch them, but this is just dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Why would they start with a system that didn't have any problems and then transition into one that is flawed? The sound mixing in this game is notoriously bad. Yes, it's been pointed out that the animation was made to be synced to the Japanese dialogue, so that when they were dubbing it into English, some of the lines were too long or didn't work properly. But what's even more of a problem than this is the volume control. Music in the cutscenes will blare over the voice acting, drowning them out with, well, most of the time sweet, delicious jams, but we'll get there soon enough. Alright, now for some quick ones. How did Amy get on this aircraft carrier?
Well, if you gotta know, I caught a ride with Tails.
No, you didn't. Knuckles breaks the Master Emerald to keep Eggman from taking it when he clearly could have just hit Eggman himself to have him drop the damn thing. Also, the Master Emerald changes in size, and it's ridiculous. Look at this. And no, this is not a Chaos Emerald. And look at this right here, after this shot right here. What? Ooh! Also, why are Knuckles and Rouge not on Angel Island where the Master Emerald should be? If you look closely, you can actually see that this is part of Tails' later level hidden base. Speaking of that, Sonic and Shadow were placed on a platform smack dab in the middle of Green Forest right before Sonic runs through Green Forest only to make it back to said platform. How does Sonic hear Eggman talking from the TV outside the limo? Sonic and Tails are a dick to Amy on more than one occasion. It's cool that Sonic gets here, but how the fuck does he get back? Why the hell does Shadow act like a genie when he gets released from the GON's captivity? The whole reason, arguably, why Shadow is even a dark side character is because he misremembered Maria's last words. Whether this is a bad thing or not is subjective, but I'm putting it here anyway. The English dub's devotion to matching the lip flaps was non-existent. Why does Shadow say this line?
Is that what chaos control is?
Unless you're talking about the deeper philosophical definition of what it is and why it exists, this is just a localization issue. It's not even a line that seemed fitting. Like, if they sat down and thought about why Shadow was saying this, they'd be like, oh, what the fuck? Shadow would not ask what chaos control is, he's been using it. Come on, guys. And what I think the absolute worst thing about this game is the confusion between Sonic and Shadow. On more than one occasion, mind you, Sonic is confused with Shadow and vice versa. Can you open your eyes? Why is this wrong? They're different fucking colors, holy shit! Is everyone in Sonic Land colorblind? Even Amy. Amy! The girl that loves Sonic more than anything in the world hugs Shadow from behind while thinking it's Sonic. Imagine, if you will, that you're in love with this beautiful blonde-haired woman, and you see a black-haired woman from behind, and you're like, oh, it's the love of my life! Also, Amy, why in holy hell would Sonic just be shooting the breeze, hanging out with Eggman and Rouge? Wow! Okay, now that the negatives are out of the way, I'd like to remind you that yes, this is my favorite Sonic game of all time. The following are the top 10 reasons why it is such, and the order of this one doesn't really matter as much as the last countdown. For some of them, I gave them their individual position for a reason, but in the middle, it's kind of, you could put the reasons anywhere. Also, there's gonna be a lot of these in the video, and some of you might not actually know what this little word means, so allow me. A view or judgment formed on something not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. allow me to reiterate, not necessarily based on fact. While I may present things in this countdown like this is such and such, or this isn't this, or X, Y, and Z, just remember that it's what I personally think about the subject matter, and you're more than free to think differently. That's the great thing about opinions. But seriously, SA2 is the best. Okay, let's begin. Number 10, great HD release. Okay, this might be a little strange to list a port of the game as one of the reasons for loving it, but that's also why it's this low on the list. But just hear me out on this, because honestly, this port is exactly what the game needed. Up until the HD release, the game was playable on a Dreamcast and on a GameCube as Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, both of which are standard quality and both required using controllers I'm not the fondest of. I recently tried playing the Dreamcast with its controller and just, like, fuck man, Jesus Christ, plastic ass analog stick, and I don't necessarily like the GameCube controller all that much. Keep in mind here that I would not label myself as anything close to a gamer, so I'm not here to debate which controller for which console in the sea of consoles ever released had the best controller. I just know that if possible, I'd like to play any given game with a PS3 controller or an Xbox controller. Anyway, the HD release updated the graphics so it wouldn't look like complete trash when playing on a modern TV. It made the entire experience, except for some cutscenes for some reason, widescreen, gave us some leaderboards which had been planned for the Dreamcast but never worked out, faster loading times, and, well, really just made the game more relevant again. Of course, SA2 has always had a large amount of recognition from the fans, but releasing it on modern consoles, i.e. PS3, Xbox 360, and on PC via Steam, breathed just the right amount of life back into the title. Usually I'm a guy that likes physical releases more than digital ones, that's why I'll always try to buy CDs instead of iTunes releases when I can. And the same usually goes for games. However, I think it works for this. The game wasn't built from the ground up, just updated to look better than it did before, so I'm fine with it. I also just like having SA2 sit there on my console forever and not having to pop the disc in every time I want to play it. This is definitely the definitive way to play SA2 nowadays, and hey, kudos to Good Guy Sega for keeping in the Big the Cat cameos from the Dreamcast version. Number 9, Nostalgia. Okay, bear with me here. I know nostalgia isn't really the best thing to use when looking at games objectively, and that's also why this is a lower one on the list. I definitely wasn't going to put it higher up just because I happen to go back with the game. However, it is true that I do. I've said this in the past, but the very first Sonic game I played was either this or the first Adventure. See, when I was considerably younger, my brother had a Dreamcast with both of these games, and I played them so closely back to back that I can't remember which one I tried out first. Regardless, if it wasn't my very first, it was my second. So because of that, I've been playing this game for years and years and years. And while my opinions on how good some of the other games that I've played for so long have changed, like with Sonic Adventure, I actually think I've only come to like this game more over the years. Like I said, I played it when my brother had a Dreamcast and the game when I was really little, and most of my memories from that time come from watching him play it. I think I probably wasn't very good at the game to have too many memories of playing it myself. But then for a while I actually forgot about it, until many years later when I was in the 5th grade I rediscovered it while watching some other videos on YouTube. That very night I talked my mom into ordering a Dreamcast along with a copy of Adventure 2. I'm not sure why I went with the Dreamcast and not a GameCube though. Probably either it was less expensive or I just remembered playing it on a Dreamcast, so that's what I bought. Sooner or later they both showed up at my door and thus began the great string of coming home, grabbing some sun chips, and playing until I went to bed. Those were the days, man. I was young without a care in the world, just wanted to raise my chow and have fun. Here's a friendly reminder to the kids who can get away with doing that today. It's not going to be like that forever, so cherish it while you can. Another great chunk of memories comes from shortly after, and I discussed this briefly in one of my past countdowns. So one of my best friends at the time lived down the street from me, but ended up having to move. Luckily, he only moved about 40 minutes away or so, so when it worked out, I'd go over to his house on a Friday night and sleep over for the weekend. Man, do I wish I could go back to those days. We were hanging out all weekend. There was a pool and a jacuzzi, we'd walk down to the supermarket and get a bunch of snacks, we'd watch a ton of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and we'd always try to stay up as late as we could. Yeah, this is obviously before we were older and staying up wasn't only easy, but now it's hard not to, at least for me anyway. With all of this, he also had a GameCube and his own copy of the SA2 port, so we'd switch off a bunch and sink hours and hours into playing it. Most of the time we'd be raising our chow, but trust me, I'll get to talking about the chow soon enough. There's no other Sonic game or game alone that I have this many memories with, so to me, someone who is still a Sonic fan today, it means quite a lot to me. I guess I'm just lucky I chose to play a good game for all those years and not some other one like, oh, well, I don't know. Number 8, level variety. Okay, now that I've talked about a port of the game and how much the game played a part in my life, let's start talking about things about the game itself, and we'll kick it off with the thing you play through in the entire game. I mean, if it weren't for the levels, you wouldn't have a game, right? Well, okay, some people would say that you would, but shut up. Right from level 1, the game shows you it's different and somewhat original with not only the designs of its levels, but the variety that come with them as well. Right when you go to start the game, you can see... Wait, what is that? You can play the bad guys! This was one of the only times in Sonic games you could do that! If you started with Hero Side first, and I've found that most people have, the first level kicks off with Sonic boarding and running through City Escape, instantly making it a breath of fresh air and straying away from all the Green Hill clones and lookalikes we've seen in games prior to this. On the flip side, if you start with Dark Side first, you're greeted with a cool industrial secret base type level. I mean, sure, Gamma's first level in Sonic Adventure was sort of similar, but you couldn't play as him from the get-go. Here, you can play as the Dark Side right off the bat, but I do have to admit, City Escape is much cooler than Iron Gate. Not including the bonus level you can unlock later, we get 31 levels in total, which are split among 6 characters. All of these have environments that range from city, desert, ancient ruins, coastal/military, forest, underwater, haunted, industrial, space, and 2 kart driving levels, even though those 2 aren't anything special. And hey, if you're worried about the lack of a Green Hill clone, don't fret. Once you unlock all 180 emblems, you unlock a special 3D recreation of the first act of Green Hill, accompanied with classic sound effects and new models for the old badniks. The thing I love about all these levels, other than the fact that I think they're all designed pretty damn well, is the fact that they feel pretty original, especially the space ones, for the time this came out. Sonic had been up to space before, but we hadn't seen anything like this, or even this. Okay, look, this level sucks the biggest of PPs, but you gotta admit, the overall idea of it is pretty cool. And it was sort of Mario Galaxy before Mario Galaxy, if you know what I mean. I don't want to say what my favorite level of the game is, just because I do plan on doing a top 10 Sonic levels at some point, so for now, I'll just let you guess. Number 7, Power-Ups. Now, power-ups in Sonic games are fairly common. You get new moves as you progress through the story. That's normal, right? While that's the case, the upgrades in SA2 are some of, if not the best in the series. Yeah, I said it! Suck it, green shoes from Sonic 06? What the fuck even was that, right? So why don't we take a look at them? Sonic and Shadow both have light shoes/air shoes, the flame ring, and the ancient light. The shoe upgrade gives them the ability to ring dash, and let me tell you, this set the standard for how light dashes across rows of rings should be. It vastly improved on the idea from Sonic Adventure. In that game, you had to stop, charge up, and then you were able to ring dash. Even if you got the crystal ring to shorten the charge time, it completely kills your momentum when you go to an area you need to ring dash at. Here, it's just done at the push of a button. Quick, seamless, easy, perfection. In Sonic Generations, you have the ability to ring dash, but it feels so context sensitive. For example, there are some areas in SA2 where you need to perform a light dash in order to progress through the level, but you can also do it with just a standard row of rings that's on the ground. In Generations, the only time you can lightspeed dash are in areas where they have specifically said, hey man, you need a ring dash here in order to keep going, so just do it here and nowhere else, instead of letting you do it at your leisure. Now, was that really a bad mark on Generations' behalf? Not necessarily, but the technique is certainly much more fun here in the game that perfected it. Anyway, the Flame Ring turns your normal somersault into one of fire, which lets you break previously unbreakable iron containers. The Ancient Light lets you destroy a chain of enemies after charging up to do so. Now here, the charging up factor feels just fine, because if you had just jumped in front of a row of enemies and pressed one button to kill them all, that would feel just too easy. Plus, in some cases, charging up is the faster way to handle things. Sonic gets 2 extra power-ups, the Bounce Bracelet and the Magic Gloves. With the aptly named former of the 2 comes the ability to bounce higher and higher, which can serve many purposes, from getting to higher platforms, destroying containers or enemies, or even just coming down to the ground faster than you would have by falling. It also comes with the Super Bounce glitch, which is performed by spin dashing towards a wall and then pressing the jump and action buttons simultaneously. Super bounces are incredibly fun to play around with, and once you get the hang of it, they're not even that hard to do. Finally, with the magic hands, you can destroy a single enemy with the push of a button, and gives you a little tiny version of them inside of a toy. Yay! Actually, you just chuck that shit right after getting it like a spoiled little kid. Now, some people have ragged on this power-up in the past, but it can actually be kind of fun, and downright useful at times. Like right here in Sonic's part of Cannon's core, don't want to risk ricocheting off the enemy and falling into the pit? BAM! Flawless. Tails and Eggman's power-ups are fairly basic. They get cannon power-ups, one of which lets you break the same metal boxes Sonic and Shadow can break with the Flame Ring. Eggman gets a health gauge boost with the protection armor, and they both get a booster/jet engine, which allows them to hover, making it the most useful power-up item. Last but not least, Knuckles and Rouge receive something to dig with, which becomes useful in their later levels. This is another action that was improved on from Adventure. Now you can simply jump and dig straight down rather than having to press 2 buttons to do so at the same time, which felt more complicated than it needed to be. They also get the hammer gloves and iron boots. They are equivalent to the flame ring, along with the sunglasses and treasure scope, which allows them to find hidden items. The great thing about all these is that only some of them are required to beat the game. Others, such as the Mystic Melody upgrade that everyone has, come into play with the extra missions, or can just make the game more fun to play. Number 6. Shadow the Hedgehog / characters. This upcoming anniversary is not only going to be Sonic's 25th, not only the 15th for Sonic Adventure 2 as a whole, but also the 15-year anniversary of Shadow the Hedgehog and Rouge the Bat, 2/3 of Darkside's portion of the game. This is kind of interesting to think about looking back. Like, today, nothing about this stands out since they're such common characters now, but back then the only familiar face on the dark side was the beautiful mug of Eggman himself. The reception to this was clearly positive, seeing as how even though Sonic Team intended to kill Shadow off in his first appearance, which would also make it his last, they brought him back for later games in the series. Now, I love all the characters in this game, but I wanted to draw specific attention to Shadow for this entry, seeing as how he's my second favorite Sonic character right behind, well, Sonic. He was introduced as the, and I know this is an Eb and Maymay buzzword, but bear with me here, edgy counterpart to Sonic, and all joking aside, I think it works well. His backstory involving Maria and Gerald Robotnik was an incredible breath of fresh air to the franchise, and it allowed this game to sort of have a darker tone compared to its predecessor and all the other games that came before it. It showed us that there can be more to the story than the old Sonic stopping Eggman once again routine. And on top of all this, Shadow actually gets development. You know, that thing that can happen when the writers actually give a shit? I'm looking at you, Pontac and Graph! Look, I'm not saying Shadow's development in SA2 was the pinnacle of storytelling in every form of media, but it's just something that stands out compared to Lost World. Throughout the entire game, Shadow thought Maria wanted him to avenge her death, when in fact she just wanted him to give them a chance to be happy. Once this memory is triggered by Amy, Shadow quickly rushes to the others to assist them in stopping the space colony, and this moment right here is freaking awesome. Now for the other characters. Sonic himself is pretty much perfect. Yeah, he's got his classic cocky attitude, which we can see right from the first line he says, but, and here's the kicker, that's not the only thing he's got to him. Yes, that is what part of what makes Sonic Sonic, but he's capable of showing other emotions. Pontac and Graph, are you still with me? When he hears that Amy's in danger, he's noticeably worried. When he's in the president's limo, he's optimistic and responsible. When Knuckles pilots the space shuttle, he gets irritated, and poorly edited. And when the egg golem appears in front of him, he goes from confident to actually shocked and wondering about the situation. Like, oh man, can I beat this guy in front of me? If this game was made today, this expression right here would be completely fucking absent. He'd say some cocky one-liner, shake his head, and destroy the thing without a thought. Sometimes it's good for Sonic to be really confident, but the writers need to realize that it's not the only tune he can hum. Lost World tried to do some of this, but it was really heavy-handed, and overall, not good. In terms of the other characters, admittedly, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy are pretty static when it comes to development, although for Knuckles, I think it works. However, they all get a little bit in this final scene at the end, reflecting on all the events that they just went through. Namely, Eggman of all people, who questions his grandfather's motives and remembered how he used to look up to him. Rouge flat out says she's done with treasure hunting and lusting after jewels, and as for Sonic, it's clear that his opinion of Shadow has changed, evident in this very important final cutscene. Number 5. Chow Raising. Do I even need to explain this reason? I'm pretty sure most people know exactly why this one's on the list, but allow me to give my reasoning. The Chow Garden feature has been loved by fans for years and years now, and it makes you wonder why Sonic Team hasn't given us a proper Chow system since. Yeah, Sonic Chronicles, that had a stellar Chow raising system. I remember nothing. Everyone that's played this game remembers playing around with the Chow raising, and I haven't ever heard someone bash this part of the game. And why would you? It's a completely optional part of the game that you don't even need to touch in order to finish it. It just serves as a mini game on the side. It also makes the game a lot more comfortable, and allow me to explain what I mean by that. Let's say you've started the game on a new file and you're halfway through one of the stories. Let's also say that you're feeling like taking a break. Now, maybe you don't necessarily want to put down the game completely, but you just want a little breathing room from the story. So what do? Head over to the Chow World, that's what. The story and levels are gonna be waiting for you when you get back. They're on standby. But for now, you're chilling, you're hanging out, you're living life. There's no missions here, you can just have fun raising these cute little virtual pets as any of these 6 playable characters. And yes, that does mean Eggman and Tails are out of their walkers at this point, and in the Dreamcast you could drown as Tails. When you first start out, you're only given the 1 standard Chow Garden along with the 2 standard Chow eggs. But once you've raised either to be a Hero or Dark Chow, you'll unlock the Hero and Dark Gardens, along with a new Chow egg for each. In the original Dreamcast version, those were the only eggs that you got. Sure, you could get more Chow by breeding, but that was something you had to wait to even get a chance for, and they didn't give you too many options with color. That is, until the GameCube port updated the Chow system and made it far, far better than it was originally. They added core features that people who haven't played the Dreamcast version might be surprised were absent until it was updated. This includes the ability to name your Chow, actually being able to see the stats in a chart that comes up when interacting with them, and the entirety of the black market. These all made the minigame much better, especially the black market. Here you can buy specific fruit, various items, some that your Chow can wear, and most importantly, different colored Chow eggs. Alright, so you've got your Chow hatched and you're ready to start raising them. How exactly do you do this? Well, throughout every single level except the driving stages, there are small animals scattered in various locations. Some are in plain sight, and some require action like breaking boxes, whistling, or destroying a fucking car. Sonic, calm the fuck down! And you wonder why the cops are chasing you, man! In total, there are 21 small animals, and they include things like penguins, cheetahs, boars, phoenixes, and even skeleton dogs? Creepy. When given to your Chow, they'll change the appearance of it by giving them features found on the small animals, like tails, ears, wings, that kind of thing. Except for the skeleton dog, that actually removes all the features given by other animals and returns your Chow to normal. In addition to the look they give your Chow, animals are the main source of bumping up your Chow's stats. Most will specialize in a certain stat while taking a few of the little tick marks away from others, but certain animals will raise all 4 stats. The first adventure had animals just like these, but SA2 added these things known as Chaos Drives, which can be found in pretty much every enemy that isn't an Eggman robot. These bump up each of the respective stats on a Chow while not giving them any animal traits, which is a good alternative if you don't want any of them. However, animals will increase stats faster, so keep that in mind. I could go on and on about Chow raising, and I already have to a certain extent, but the main thing I wanted to say about this feature is how much fun and replayability it added to the game. It's a great change of pace from the story and levels, and it gives you even more purpose to play through the levels over and over so you can get animals, chaos drives, and more rings to spend at the black market. I'm really hoping to see the return of Chow Gardens sometime soon, as I'm sure many other fans are. They're just too darn fun and cute, and you can kill them! Number 4. Music. Some of you may be familiar with my past countdown where I counted down my top 10 favorite Sonic soundtracks, and yep, SA2's soundtrack was that list's number 1. Whether it's the vocal themes, level music, tunes used for cutscenes and menus, the whole soundtrack is great. Now on the soundtracks countdown, I was only including officially released individual soundtracks, and some of you who are knowledgeable of this sort of thing might know that the vocal themes, Bar, Live, and Learn, are on a separate release, while the multi-dimensional soundtrack has all the level, cutscene, Chow, menu, etc. music. But for this spot on the list, I'm talking about all the music that appears in the game. Now, most Sonic fans are at least a little familiar with Jun Sonoe, longtime composer and sound director of many of the Sonic the Hedgehog titles, and while he handled the majority of the music in the game, he wasn't the only one who worked on it. Of the handful of people involved with the music production are Kenichi Tokoi, Tomoya Otani, and Fumi Kumatani. Tokoi worked on a large amount of the cutscene music, as well as a few of the Char Garden and Chow Race tracks, and arranging this game's version of Knuckles' theme. Otani, who would later work on a large amount of the soundtracks for Sonic 06, Unleashed, and Colors, handled most of the remaining cutscene music, a few of the Chow songs, and all of Knuckles' stage music, accompanied by the Great Hunted P, of course. And Kumatani worked on the themes for Shadow and Rouge, a few of the remaining Chow songs, a few cutscene pieces, and most of Rouge's level music. She also worked with Heigotani when it came to the more house music tracks, like 2 pieces for Shadow's levels, 4 True Story for Sonic vs. Shadow, and one of my personal favorite compositions from the game, Supporting Me for BioLizard. I apologize if that all seemed very wall of text-esque, but I wanted to point out the different key people involved in the production of this game's music. And to all the people that I didn't mention, on the incredibly slim chance you may be watching this right now, I'm very glad you had a hand in working on the music, because it's all great. Pointing out these different people helps me explain how different parts of the game sound, well, different, in a good way. These people got to work on separate parts, and this is why Rouge's music sounds very different from Sonic's music, or why Shadow's level music has a drum and bass or house feel to it. It's also what gave us the incredibly amazing Knuckles raps, including Ghost Pumpkin Soup, a fan favorite. Speaking of fan favorites, we also get Escape from the City and Live and Learn, which are both legendary in terms of Sonic musical history. We got new, completely different versions of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles' theme song from Adventure, although I have to say that I do like the Adventure versions more. But these ones are fine too, except Believe in Myself. I don't like that one at all. And we also got one of Eggman's best themes ever. This game's music is one of the few that I have almost the entirety of on my iPod because it's so easy to listen to. Some tracks can be very calming, think Rouge's levels, while others can be really easy to rock out to, think Green Forest or Live and Learn. Of all the songs here, I think my current favorite is Keys the Ruin for Pyramid Cave. There's something about the guitar that's used in it that I really like, and I think it's kind of underrated. Number 3. Story. Sonic Adventure 2 took the newly introduced aspect of an actual story that Adventure had and brought to the table, and expanded upon it 10 times over. The one we got this time around was a bit deeper and darker compared to what we had seen before, or even what we see today. Let me say this, I do think Sonic games should have a good reliance on story, that's why this is this high on the list. Yes, gameplay is the one thing that should matter most, but a good story gives us something else to look at between all the levels and boss fights, and it can make the game that much more memorable. As stated before, we got Rouge and Shadow, who served important parts to the story. Mainly the latter, as the whole plot starts with Eggman releasing Shadow from Gun's captivity. It really helped that Shadow also had some cool backstory to boot. That's something we haven't really seen before, and have seldom seen since. His past having to do with Gerald Robotnik, and more importantly Maria, was so fresh, and it also gave him some sort of a reason to be all dark and brooding-like. I mean, nowadays, Shadow's whole arc, no pun intended, has pretty much been resolved, starting with this game, continuing in Heroes, and settling in his own game, and slightly in 06. Now he doesn't really have a reason to be all Edgemaster, but what are you gonna do, the kiddies love it. The two sides, Hero and Dark, serve to fill some of the gaps you might not understand while just playing through one side, with a handful of the Dark Side events canonically taking place a good deal before Hero Side even begins. This is something that I really like, and works very well when you've got two different points of view going on. Eventually, once you've beaten both sides, you unlock the last story episode, which finishes the game off. It also kinda goes against one of the slogans for the game, save the world or conquer it. Like sure, in the dark side you might be trying to take over the world, but in the end you end up saving it, so you don't get a choice. Something I love about this game's story is the fact that it took itself seriously. Now, it wasn't taking itself overly seriously, like but it also wasn't laughing at itself and focusing solely on comedy like Colors. It was also handled really well, and it makes me wonder if they'll ever get Sonic right again. Lost World made some improvements from what we saw in Colors. I won't count Generations because its story, or lack thereof, isn't even worth talking about. The game did what it needed to do, but it's time for Sonic Team to show us that they can still make not only a good game, but one with a great story attached to it. Number 2. Level missions / replayability. Something that has stuck with me about Sonic Adventure 2 is just how replayable it is. I already talked about the chow raising aspect, which is probably the #1 thing that kept people coming back to the game time and time again. Something Izuka specifically wanted both in this game and Adventure, and it's not like you would just stay in the Chow Gardens and do nothing else.
Well, you could, but you'd get really bored really fast. Chow raising got players to go back to the levels many times to get things like chaos drives and small animals. However, there is something else that added a lot of replayability. The level missions. Each stage had a total of 5 missions, including the first standard one. The second was to collect 100 rings. The third, find the lost Chow. The fourth was basically mission 1 but within a time limit. And the fifth was a hard mode, where the level would get slightly restructured and be more challenging. All stages had these 5 missions except for the 2 driving levels, which had ones like don't hit the walls or don't hit the cars. Let me compare this to a more modern game, Generations. See, Generations had missions, yes, and some of them are pretty cool. However, they're sort of all over the place. There's no real rhyme or reason to which stages have which missions. There are, however, groupings that all the missions fall under, like ones that involve other characters, use of a power-up, or the doppelganger races. SA2's missions were completely streamlined, with every single level having the same missions, with the exception of the driving ones. I actually think that this method works better than what Generations did. While changing missions for every level might make it seem like they're more unique, there's no sense of firm familiarity between them, and a good chunk of them will be different every time with a new objective. And if you like one mission in particular, unless it's a doppelganger race or something, then you're only going to be able to enjoy it on one level. In addition to this, it's mandatory to play through at least a few of the missions to advance in the game, and I really wish it wasn't. Instead of padding the game out by making some of these mandatory, even if you still got to choose which ones to play, they should have just made more normal levels. Still waiting on that Generations DLC, Sega, where is it? On top of all this, the ranking system in SA2 was stricter compared to the one in Generations. If you don't die and you aren't a dumb ape, you should have no problem getting an S rank on most of the levels. Though, in its defense, they made it more difficult for some missions. Look, I'm not saying that the missions in Generations are bad, they're good for what they're worth. I just needed something to use as a comparison to the ones SA2 has. SA2's ranking system seems perfectly balanced, and getting an A rank isn't necessarily easy for a lot of the missions. You've actually gotta try to get one, especially for missions 1, 4, and 5. If you're just speedrunning a level, you're not gonna get an A rank. I think now would be a good time to bring up one peculiar little change that I noticed in the HD port of the game, which is in Cosmic Wall's 5th mission, the hard mode. So for some reason, they must have thought getting an A rank on this mission was just too easy in the original, so they changed the minimum point total to get an A rank from 50,000 to 100,000. They doubled the fucking point amount. This made it like a bajillion times harder. You've got to be like a pro at the game to get an A rank on this version of the mission. I'd like to think I'm pretty damn good at the game, and it took me several tries to finally get it right. I ended up finding out about this handy little bug. If you're locked onto a bunch of enemies and then walk or hover away so they're off screen while you release the shot, some enemies will despawn and not get destroyed, while you get all the points for them and the combo, and then you could just go and destroy them again. Even with this trick helping me, it was difficult to get an A, and to my knowledge this is the only mission that they changed the parameters in the rankings. Very strange. Anyway, the missions made this game a lot more fun and replayable, even if one was slightly altered in the HD version. Alright, no honorable mentions this time, so let's get right to the top reason. Number 1. Gameplay. Alright, let me be honest here. I really just want to talk about Sonic and Shadow's control / gameplay here. Knuckles, Rouge, Tails, and Eggman? I like their gameplay. I didn't always, but over the years they've grown on me quite a lot. Knuckles controls better than Adventure Knuckles, and the Walkers control better than Gamma did in Adventure. They're fine, I like playing them. If you guys really wanted to hear me talk about these stages, I could do so on another occasion and in another video, but let's talk about Sonic. In my opinion, this is the best Sonic has ever moved and controlled in a 3D environment. He's got his speed, lots of it in fact, but handles exceptionally well with platforming too, whether it be fast or slow. Later games, like Generations and Unleashed, shifted focus more towards speed and having things rush past you than on solid platforming. Or when they do choose to put emphasis on platforming for a certain part, the perspective is shifted from 3D to 2D, and, well, I've heard Colors as a whole is a shining example of that concept. Have you noticed something different between those games and Adventure 2? Oh yeah, there are absolutely no 2D sections here. Do you want to know why this new modern trend of 2D sections even became a thing? My guess is that Sonic Team just put out Sonic 06, saw the backlash it caused because it was so far from what Sonic used to be, panicked and said, shit, alright, we gotta put something from the good old days, you know, the good old days, you know, the Genesis days. Oh, remember how Sonic used to be 2D? Bam! And that's why they're here, in our modern games. Alright, Don't get me wrong, I love Unleashed and Generations a whole lot. Just watch the last countdown to hear me talk about them. And it's not like absolutely all the platforming is done in the 2D sections. But this right here, this is how I think Sonic should play. Maybe not exactly like this, seeing as how this game is 15 years old, but something similar. If you disagree, please refer to the timestamp on screen. See, the problem nowadays is that everyone has a slightly different answer to the question, how should Sonic play? Or even, how should Sonic be? That's why we've gotten so many different gameplay styles now. Like, what is this? This isn't a Sonic. It's not even just the fans that don't know how Sonic should be, it's Sonic Team themselves. They're just as dumbfounded as we are. I can see the boardroom meeting with Izuka like, dude, just, like, what the fuck do we even do at this point? We still have Wisps as a gameplay element. Who the fuck wanted Wisps again? Who asked for this? When you ask people, what is Sonic more about, the speed or the platforming? Most people would probably answer speed. But look, first game in the series, right there, platforming! Speed was used more to advertise Sonic because it's what made him unique at the time. Back in the days of the console wars, there were a lot of platformers, but there weren't any that had a large amount of speed like Sonic did. So naturally, this is what Sega advertised. They weren't going to make commercials like, hey, we've got a platforming game all about platforming, just like every other platformer. No, speed made the Sonic games different from all the others, so that's what they promoted. But know this, speed is what makes Sonic different, not what defines him. It's not all about speed or all about platforming, it's about both. And right here in Adventure 2 is where I think it's done best. You might not be moving at a breakneck pace that makes some things hard to comprehend, but you are indeed going fast because, well, you gotta. This is the perfect speed for Sonic, and you don't need a fucking run button to do it. You're able to move at the pace you want to. If you want to walk or go slower on the rails, go ahead. See, that's something you can actually do here. And how have I not mentioned the spin dash yet? Easily, without a doubt, the best 3D spin dash there has ever been. It can make the game a lot faster and make platforming a lot more fun. So if you're still under the impression that Sonic's all about speed, then just spam the spin dash button. If you want to speedrun levels in Adventure 2, then you'll have a lot of fun. It's entertaining to see how quickly you can get through parts of the level and how flawlessly you complete the stage. But speedrunning isn't going to give you an A rank. The ranking system's based on points, which you get by destroying enemies and platforming. That's the difference between this and the modern Sonic games like Generations. These levels are built with platforming in mind first, but can also be speedrunned. Generations emphasizes speed and has its levels built around the speedrunning aspect, basically wanting the player to play and get through the level as fast as they can, which they are rewarded for given how the ranking system works in that game, instead of having that be an additional playstyle chosen by the player. If Sonic Team could make future titles with a blend of these two gameplay styles and no fucking run button, I would be very, very happy. Well, that just about does it for my long spiel about SA2 and why I like it so much and think it's so good. I'm glad I got to do a video like this, where I get a ton of the things that I want to say about this game out in the open, so hopefully I don't have to repeat myself a lot in the future. Of course, there are still going to be things to talk about, and it's not like I'm saying I'm never going to talk about this game again, but if you ever ask, why does that stupid Sonic fan that makes the stop motions like SA2 so much? Well, hopefully I've just answered your question. Thanks so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way through to the end. I know it was a long video. As always, you can check out my other countdowns I've done, as well as the latest episode of my aforementioned stop-motion series that everyone will ask me when the next episode is. Answer, I don't know! You can also follow me on Twitter at Piplupfan77. That's it for me. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.